Welcome to the DCC Podcast, Episode 5. We're here with guest Miss Bahoura. She's been teaching here for what, 4 years
4
now?
years, yep.
Yeah, so she's been very involved. She started clubs like Rock, Vitae, Mesa. You said you're in Shamrock ID as well.
Well, I used to be.
You used to be.
No.
So,
I'm
yeah.
part of the Kairos retreat.
Yeah, so we'll start off by, I just want to ask you, what drove you to become a teacher? What was that passion like? How'd that start?
So ever since I was a little kid, I've always I just had a passion for, it's funny to say, as a little kid, I had a passion for other little kids, like younger than me, to help them out in different ways. And as I got older, I used to play teacher in my basement. And that was like in middle school, I would say. And then getting into high school, I still really wanted to be a teacher, but there were a lot of issues in the world that kind of took me away from that idea. When, even still now, a difference of pay and jobs and the negatives, I guess you could say, which you could say with any career, there's negatives. So my family was not too happy about that route. So with respect to them, I kept my options open and looked into other fields. Long story short, I went to Oakland University out in Rochester and started off in a different program and then kind of went right back to teaching. So I knew it was kind of a passion of mine, not for any particular reason. I don't have anybody in my life that was a teacher. I guess if I had to give any reason, it would be because I remember the teachers I had when I was younger, and I felt like they made a big impact on me, especially because of my own academic struggles, that I realized and recognized that. And as I got older, I realized I can also be that person to other younger children. I started off in elementary education. Yeah. And so that was literally younger children, right? So I would start off with 10-year-olds. I taught you, Angelo, when you were 10. And I had you again junior year and now again senior year. Mm-hmm. So it came back full circle. So it's kind of initially how I got started in elementary education, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So
what made you choose theology, right? Most kids know that Miss Bahoura is a theology teacher. I know you taught math in 5th grade, but what made you just stick with theology?
Yeah, so I guess the best way to describe this is to go back really quick. I never thought I'd be a high school teacher. I still do today, but when I was in my 20s, I did many youth group activities. So I was involved in the youth ministry, which were high school students. And then I was teaching 5th grade. And everybody used to be like, why aren't you teaching high school? Like, you do high school ministry. And so I never thought I would get into that field, especially because my education degree was for elementary school kids. As a teacher, you're always looking to higher education, to have higher pay, to be, to just grow in your field. So I wanted to do something I wanted to get my master's degree in something that was going to connect with my life and not just get it as a checkbox, like I could get paid more and then move on. So as I was in ministry, my friends were just talking about like life and the future, and one of my friends was like, why don't you do theology? Like you're very interested in, the subject and your faith life and stuff. And I was like, that's not a bad idea. Like maybe I can look into the classes. I applied to Sacred Heart Major Seminary downtown Detroit, and they're pretty quick with responding. So like literally the next day they responded to me and was like, why don't you come in, make an appointment, look at the classes. So long story short, it just looked like a career path that I was like not very clear about, but it was something that I was like, I just felt like I guess from my own way, my viewpoint is I felt called to do it.
In God's will.
Yeah, I did. I felt called. My parents, being very cultured, they had a lot of say in that. They're like, what are you going to do with that degree? And I didn't think I was going to teach theology. And God led me to CC after I left Our Lady of Sorrows school. And that was just kind of one of those things where it just kind of fell in my lap of, I have this degree, and I still want to be a teacher in the classroom. I could use this degree for other things in churches and different places and evangelization centers, but I just don't feel like I'm ready to leave the actual classroom yet. So.
All right, so you said that you loved impacting students in general. Mm-hmm. So you were a great teacher inside of school, but I wanted you to kind of elaborate what you do outside of school with the clubs that you were in. And me personally, when you were on Kairos with me, as one of my teachers, you made a huge impact. So I just wanted you to elaborate on that.
Sure. So let's see, I started off with Shamrock ID when I think my second year here, which was faith-filled groups, excuse me, discussions about the faith, and then like individually. Then it kind of led to, that was kind of something I did for a short term. Then Mr. Walters, our campus minister, asked me to take over the pro-life club at CC. So Rocks Vitae is what we call it, Rocks for Life. And essentially...
So that was already a thing?
It was.
Oh, it was.
It was. It wasn't, you could say it wasn't a big thing, like not for any reason, just it was a club. It was a club, but it wasn't, didn't have much going on. So it was already a thing. The moderator at the time couldn't continue it. And so Mr. Walters asked me to pursue it. And so I, for myself, and this is something I do for a lot of things I commit to, is if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it full force, not just in a minimal way. So I kind of started from scratch in a little bit because there was not much going on with it. So I'm very passionate about fighting against abortion and really giving, babies life. And so being in an all-boys school, I think it's extremely important. And so I had to kind of create this foundation of how do we create awareness, who's interested, kind of starting a club like any club, but then also bringing in the understanding of like, this is like a real cause in this world. It's not just let's sit and talk about it. We ought to do something about it. So that kind of started continuing on, and we go to the March for Life in Lansing as well as DC, and we meet a few times a month, every other week right now, and we do a lot of different things. We had a movie day yesterday as well, showing the movie Unplanned, and so that kind of, it kind of has its own like routine, I guess you could say now. But you mentioned Kairos as well, so a lot different, I guess you could say, from the Pro-Life Club. So that's something that I will say kind of got started with my experiences of my ministry in the church, outside of the classroom, and knowing that there's retreats in our school, I was able to understand it from that perspective. So I tend to have like my classroom self, and then I have my retreat self, and it's a little less formal, on retreat, as you know, Matthew and Angelo, right? I led yours too, or I chaperoned yours, and you led. And so I guess like you said, elaborate on it. I find that Kairos is one of the best things that our school could ever do. And I think you both can agree with that.
100%.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah. And a lot of that has to do with like, we're not on a classroom, right? The biggest thing is like, I think our theology department is amazing, and we sit and we talk about Jesus, and we ask questions and we answer questions. But there's something about being in a classroom, and you go to you have 8 hours a day, you're going from class to class to class to class, and you're just drained. Even if you're like super faithful, you love Jesus, and sometimes in a theology class, you're just like, oh my gosh, I just want to leave. I just want to sleep. We recognize that. On a retreat, it's the complete opposite. You don't have a million things to do. You're strictly there for that goal, sole purpose of figuring out your faith life and figuring out who you are as a person. And you're not tired because you're not going to a million other classes. You're not studying. You're not doing homework. So it's really a helpful thing to just take away everything from the world and just sit and like focus on like, who am I, right? Right. So that would be like, I guess you could say, my elaboration on, that's why I continue to do it. And that's why I love it. And that's why, and I find so much truth in it and so much like impact, right? As you guys know, and it does impact people in small ways and long ways, like long-term ways, and people come back, right? People come back to the faith because of it, and I've seen it. I have so many stories of what I've seen from Kairos, so it really is an amazing thing.
How much work is it to set up the March for Life trip? Because I'm sure it's a lot, and I know it gets filled up really quickly. So
yeah, that's a very stressful thing that I do.
So how do you organize it? Do you have to like get a hotel? You have to schedule different buses.
Yeah, it's like 6 months in advance. So in the summertime, I'm making phone calls, I'm emailing for the hotels, the buses, for food, and then looking into like if we go to like a big event there, then we have to get tickets to go there. This year we went to a monastery, which I had to, reserve that. Then you have the advertising of it for students. Right. Getting deposits, all the logistical stuff, all the administration stuff regarding it, and that, then like hounding people down for their money and for their permission slips, and so it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it's always worth it in the end.
Did you guys listen to speakers at the March for Life?
We did. We went to an event through the Archdiocese of Arlington first. So there were some speakers there. And then we also, at the rally, the March for Life rally, previous to the actual march that starts, they do have some speakers there as well. Jim Harbaugh was there this year. Another athlete was there. They had a handful of people. Yeah. I know Father Mike Schmitz has been there a couple years ago. Jonathan Rumi was there last year. So, yeah.
So, yeah, I know the rally, the March for Life protest is one way to support the organization. But for people like me, I don't really like to go into the big crowd and protest like that. Can you explain other venues of helping this organization and the cause?
So the cause, not necessarily the march then.
Right. Yeah,
right? Because the march is more of the expose. Mm-hmm. You're out there, you're yelling in the sense of like protesting, chanting and all that. Yes, definitely. There are so many pregnancy clinics, crisis centers that people help, on their own time, volunteers. Obviously there's in a monetary way, people can donate money, but a lot of people donate baby stuff. Baby items, whether it's their used items from their own families, or they go out and buy items and donate. A lot of pregnancy clinics are not run completely. A lot of them have volunteers that just go and they help. So, and that's not super exposed, right? They're not asking you to go pray at an abortion clinic, which can be intimidating, or go to the March for Life rally. But they definitely are giving opportunities to help in different ways that are not as out there.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's continue on with this topic
Sure.
of abortion. So I know it got passed from the Supreme Court, right? Now it's the state's decision, correct? Mm-hmm. Is the March for Rally going to be staying in D.C., or is there also other rallies per each state?
Yeah.
How
so
does that work?
The March for Life organization itself. Yeah. Last year, after Roe v. Wade overturned, started to go state to state themselves. There's always been smaller rallies, because of their own organizations and local organizations. But the March for Life organization as a whole, the USA organization, started to go state to state to help create a larger, on a smaller scale, a group of people in their capital. So we did go to Lansing back in November, and that was run by the March for Life organization. Jeannie Mancini, who's the president of it, was there, and they did have speakers similar to the DC one. It was the same concept, except it was just a day trip. It was a field trip. We came back, I think, before the end of the day of school.
Oh, so you took CC?
We did. Oh,
okay.
It was the first time they did it. Michigan was the first time Michigan did it. It was in Lansing. We took about 30 guys. We went for the day. It was freezing cold. It was raining the whole day. But there was I would say there was 1,000, a little over 1,000 people there overall. So to answer your question directly, yes, more states are doing that because of the organization, but that will not stop it will not stop us from going to DC, because we can't lessen our people, right? We have to still show a greater sense of activism it's not done yet, right? Abortion is not ended, and we still need to protest against it, even if we're not protesting directly against the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it's just like we talked about on Catholic social teaching. Mm-hmm. We put a Band-Aid on the problem.
Yes.
But we haven't gone.
Oh, good example, Angelo. You listen in class. Good.
Listen in class.
No, you're right. You're good.
So with these trips, like March for Life and Kairos, would you recommend everybody to go on it? Because with my experience, I went on Kairos this year as a junior, and for March for Life, you strongly advocated for me to go freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year, and I think it completely changed the way I see other people. I've made new friendships with it, but also I have changed my mind on many things that my family once told me. So if you could please just elaborate on what you do at March for Life.
Yeah, I think an overall perspective in general, I think it's good to expose ourselves to a lot of different things, which is why I strongly advocate for these types of trips, because the world around us, in a school, sometimes we can be stuck in a bubble, I like to say. And I say that from my own personal experience, too, of life and, going to Catholic school my whole life as well. And sometimes we're just kind of stuck with who we are around, and we feel like there's nobody else, or we feel like everybody else is like us, right? Everyone's the same. And then you go to college and you're like, whoa, never mind. Everybody's really different. And And I think we should not, something I say in class a lot, and I think I say this in every class, is we should not be ignorant to the outside world, right? We should not be ignorant to different viewpoints, to different perspectives, even if we disagree. So what I like about physically going to a place like DC for the March for Life, and then also going in more of a subtle, more, I don't want to say secretive, but more of a enclosed, not as exposed place like Kairos, we are exposing ourselves to different people, like you said, different places, different people, different perspectives of life. So by doing so, we are growing in our character, and we are growing in our development of just who we are as a person, right? So it shapes who we are. Nobody, and I say this because people like to use the word force, like, well, if you're going to go there, then you're just forced to believe everything you're in front of. No, not necessarily. We all have our own mindset. If we have a closed mindset, then if we have like a mindset of like, I'm going to believe everything I see in front of me, that's also not healthy either, right? We should not have that mindset. And we should not have blind faith, right? We should ask questions. We should look at outside perspectives, and then we kind of come down to a decision in our faith life, our political beliefs. Then we make a decision. But if you come to DC with me, I'm not forcing you to agree with everything that we do. But I do think that it helps to expose you, not just you, right? Anybody, exposes us to different things that we otherwise may not have seen before.
Yeah. One of the main reasons I went to DC is because I was not able to go to DC in 8th grade with my classmates.
Yes.
So when you asked about it, I'm just like,
you're like, yep, I'm going. The last couple of years, that's one of the reasons for a handful of people, right? Then you go, and then you don't realize.
Now I go for the march specifically.
Yeah.
I love it. I love the atmosphere. You should really go sometime, Angelo.
I should. I would love to.
You could go as an adult.
I could go as an adult. But, as you were saying, right, Mr. George has this quote, say, cuss and discuss, right? I feel debate is super important for growth, not only, as an individual, but as a community and as a country as a whole, right? So, have you ever, I think there's a debate, is there a debate club at CC?
Shamrock Voice.
Shamrock.
Okay, I think so.
Have you been a part of that at all?
No, I haven't. I've been part of too many things right now. No, I haven't been a part of that.
Well, I would think that, because not many, majority of the kids agree that abortion is, bad because we're at a Catholic school, right? But there's a few that might not have that opinion.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I know we talk about it a little bit in class and we're allowed to, answer to you and you answer back. And I feel like that's just super important, right? All right, moving on to the next topic that I feel like we should talk about is your background. You're Middle Eastern Catholic, right? Which is kind of rare. I know my grandparents are also Middle Eastern Catholic. They came from Iraq, and they're Chaldeans. I'd say they're Catholics from Iraq, right? So how much of that has impacted your faith life?
Yeah. So just to make it as clear as possible, because people do have a misunderstanding a little bit of who we are. You and I, right, are Eastern Rite Catholics, which is a branch of Catholicism. So we're still under the papacy, right, the Pope in Rome. We are in line with the papal see, like with Rome, with the Pope and the bishops and so on. We are not Orthodox, or at least I'm not. I know you have family and your father, who's not Chaldean. So all Chaldeans from Iraq, in the sense of, I guess you could say, the last few hundred years, are Catholic or Eastern Rite Catholics. Okay. How has that helped me though to grow in my faith? Oh my gosh, I don't know where I'd be today if I was not Chaldean, and I say that because I have a lot of pride in who I am as a person, and the families, the roots that I come from. And it's funny because one of my downfalls is I don't know the language as well as I would love to, but that's because I was born and raised here in Michigan, and my family immigrated from Iraq a long time ago, and my parents were both born in Iraq, and they both came at a young age, didn't know each other then, they got married here. So obviously the language tends to you lose it because of the American culture, but what's beautiful is that our churches in a sense, picked up and came here too. And we've created this community around our churches where we have a very, very, very tight-knit community of people because of the church, not the opposite.
Right.
It's not like the church is like, oh, like there's all the Chaldean people, like, let's try to like, get in over there. Well, they do that too, right? They obviously look at, demographics of areas and they're like, we need a Chaldean church here because everyone's driving 25 minutes to go to this church. Right. So they recognize because of that, area, they'll move. However, it's because it kind of is what keeps us united. So I did go to youth group when I was in high school and in the Chaldean church. And I will say I grew up a lot different than many people here, you could say. My parents were very strict, and because of our culture, it was, they were adapting to the American culture, but at the same time, they still had a lot of values and difference of perspectives of life from their Iraqi mentality of just having children and, like who your friends are and who you date and all these things. It's like they have a say. And in any Middle Eastern culture, right, for anybody that's listening, we usually would agree with me. And it's not just a Catholic thing. It's also just a Middle Eastern thing, right? Strictness of parents, but that's also because of the family orientation. So anyway, growing up, I had a lot of non-Chaldean friends. And I had some Chaldean friends, one being your aunt, actually. And but I felt really different than my non-Chaldean friends. And I say that with respect. Obviously, I love all of my non-Chaldean friends. I have so many now. But they didn't understand how my parents were. And they would kind of leave me out of a lot of things because of that. And it really would kind of separate me from them. And they weren't doing it in a discriminatory way. And they weren't doing it intentionally. But I was just very different from them. And I realized that until I started going to my youth groups at my church. And then I went on a retreat in high school at my church. And then I met other Chaldean girls that lived the same exact life I lived. The type of parents they had were the same kind of parents I had. And it was just kind of whoa, okay, I feel like I belong, right? Mm-hmm. So that helped me grow because then what was happening was, these girls that I was meeting, we had the same morals and values. We went to different schools, but then we would go to youth group together. Then we go to mass together. Then we go to retreats together. And then they literally just became my friends. To this day, they're literally my best friends. I can name you probably 10 girls I'm still friends with today are because of those retreats and youth groups in high school. We laugh at that because we're like, wow, we were just so young and, whatever. But I think that has a lot to do with it, being Chaldean. I can go to mass at my church and see people that I haven't seen in years, or maybe I led them in youth group because when I started leading. So there's a lot of that's the community aspect. Because we're Chaldean and we like to stay together, we don't really leave. Yeah. So then the beauty of that is you don't leave. So then everybody and you see everybody. And you're everybody's cousin, right? And then everybody makes fun of us. Non-Chaldeans make fun of us. You're all cousins. Well, we kind of are. We don't leave each other. We love each other that much that we don't want to leave. And I find a lot of beauty in that. And I find a lot of, I don't take that for granted. I have cousins in California, and it sucks that they're there, and I miss them so much. But that's it. I have one family with the kids, and that's it. And all of my 42 cousins are literally in the vicinity of West Bloomfield, Commerce, Walled Lake. I literally they're down the street, and right. So I think it's fun, right? And so that has helped my faith life to stay in my church where I feel like I belong, and then also connecting that to my family as well as my friends.
Have you always had a strong relationship with God?
Well, that actually relates to the retreat I went on in high school.
Oh, okay.
My family was definitely culturally Catholic, the same way a lot of Chaldeans are, and the same way anybody grows up kind of in the Catholic Church, just kind of culturally Catholic. I would say that I remember when I was younger, I always loved God, and I remember I used to think, how could I love God more than my parents? That's weird. There's no way I can love God more than my parents. And then as time went on, and I grew in my faith and my maturity, and then I went on this retreat, and I realized, whoa, there's way more to life than just go to mass and be a good person and, do good things and do good deeds. I can't pinpoint anything on the specific retreat. I've led the retreat a couple times. It's not Kairos. It was a different girls' retreat. And I cannot tell you what happened on that retreat, but I left that retreat feeling this is it. The reality of God and the reality of Jesus is how we're supposed to live our lives. And I want to live it. I want to live it, right? It was more of a personal, my parents had everything the person I am today is because of my parents. The faith I have today is because of my parents, the foundation they created. Yeah. But then I made a choice, right? Then I made a choice where it was like, now that foundation that they created, then I kind of branched off of that and was like, okay, now I can do it myself, but with them, right? So you could say that, you know, that retreat changed the trajectory of my life. You know, I just, you know, what you think about yourself in 10 years in high school, you're like, oh, I'm just going to, you know, go to college, have this career, get married, have kids, and that's life, right? But it's like, oh my gosh, life is so much more than that. I've, like, you know, I didn't just become a teacher. I've done all these youth groups and these retreats, and I've seen people's lives change because of God. And it's just like, I look back at my, like, life the last, like, you could say 10, 15 years, and it's kind of like a whoa factor, like, whoa, like, what happened? Like, God took me in so many different places I never thought I would be. But that has all to do, in my beliefs, that has all to do with following his will and following my gifts and talents and then going with my, like, using them, right? So then I can be the best version of myself in the gifts and talents that I have, and then it rubs off on you guys, right? Like, the goodness I have rubs off on you guys. Obviously, I have my negatives and my faults and my sins, but I'm not focused on that, right? I'm focused on the good that God has given to me. So with that, that's kind of how I built my foundation of faith, where I don't leave my guard down, right? The devil's real. My prayer life, I struggle time and time again, and I just keep picking myself back up. I never miss Mass, even if I don't want to go, right? And I don't say that to put myself on a pedestal at all. I say that because it's possible to not miss Mass. I've done it. And COVID was
that was crazy.
COVID, like, ruined me of not going to Mass. Like, and I that made me think, like, of, like, I took the Eucharist for granted. I took confession for granted. You know, then it helped me even more to kind of not take those things for granted. Anyway, I digress from that. So that has the Chaldean Church, my theology program, as well as just the foundation of my childhood, has really led me to grow in my faith and then wanting to share it. So as you guys know, because I've had both of you in class, actually have you both now, and had you before, I don't teach because I just like to teach. I like to teach, but I love Jesus. And so I have this passion for teaching my faith life, and even if I stopped being a teacher, it wouldn't stop me from sharing Jesus, like, with the people around me.
Right. So you talk about how you have such a strong foundation that your parents set, and so do I. Right. I'm so thankful for my parents as well, and the foundation they've helped me build. Right. But I have had some doubt, and that doubt has helped me become who I am today with a stronger faith than in the past. Right. So what do you recommend for people who, let's say, their parents don't go to church and they don't have a good foundation and they have a bunch of doubt? What do you recommend to them?
If somebody is open to learning, that's their first step. So you're asking if someone's open to learning, what should they do?
Open.
Then they have to find the people, right? So you have to find the groups and find the people. It is almost nearly impossible to do it on your own. And I say that because we all need each other. And if you think about, if I asked both of you, like, think about the most influential people in your life, whether they were your mom or dad, or if it's a teacher or a coach, even for a short time, right? It could even be for a short time, or it could be longer where it's like a grandpa where it's, you know, there's still people that are influencing you, right? So with answering your question, people that say that, well, my faith is my own and I don't share it. Well, that's not a solid foundation of faith, because then who's going to pick you back up when you fall? Who's going to help you? Who's going to hold you accountable? If you have nobody, you're going to fail, because we're human, right? We're all going to fail. So if you don't have your parents or siblings or, you know, family, which would be the best, it would be ideal. If you don't have that, then, and you want it, you got to find the people. So for example, at CC, it's pretty easy, right? Because not to say you find that the people is easy, like peers, you have teachers, you have mentors, you have coaches, you have people that there is a foundation of at least Christian values that can help people to lead. It would be a lot harder in public school. It could be a lot harder just even as an adult, where you're outside of this world now. And so then where do I go? That's where I encourage my seniors to always seek out the Catholic programs at the universities. The Catholic groups, now in the year 2024, I graduated 2014 from Oakland University. There's so many more Catholic and Christian groups out there now, more than when I was back at OU. Like now, I'm so jealous. They have a Catholic group now at OU. They didn't when I was there. I should have started one. Yeah. I didn't think about it. You can find almost any place that there's groups, right? And I think that's so important. And I know CC students have come back and they've told me like, oh yeah, I found the group. They go to mass together, right? They have Bible studies together. They go to parties together. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing things with people that with the same morals and values, right. And then you're able to hold each other accountable. That's the biggest thing, is finding people that have the same morals and values as you do. So then you create that foundation, and then you can hold each other accountable. And I always think back on the two foundations, the parable of the two foundations, right? In Scripture, where you build your house on sand, the rain come, the winds come, it's gonna fall. Right. You build your house on rock, you have way more of a potential solid foundation to hold it, right? And it'll chip and it'll break and things will happen, but that foundation is still solid. And that has everything to do with how we make our decisions in life.
Right, yeah.
So,
you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right?
So it is not wrong to have friends and family that have different viewpoints. We just talked about that, right? It's good to have that. But I can't trust that person. If I have an issue in my life that I'm dealing with, a major issue, that I need that influence of God, I'm going to call this friend and not that friend, with respect to this friend, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you out of my own experiences. Like yesterday, I needed to vent about something with one of my friends, and there's a specific friend I wanted to share this with, and there's a specific friend I didn't want to share this with. And I'm not saying I'm looking for I'm not looking I know she's going to give me what I want, so I want to ask her. No, I actually know she's going to give me the truth, but having God involved with it, right? Where she could criticize me in a charitable way. I should be like, you're wrong, Alana, but I know in her way to get there is prayer and faith and morals and values that I hold. Whereas maybe the other friend, she can give me good advice, or he can give me good advice, but I recognize that maybe their viewpoints are not the same as mine, so I may not trust that advice as much, and I don't want it, right? So, and that's just my own personal,
I agree with that.
Yeah. With Catholic Central, there are so many different perspectives, so many different people here that are different religions. Sure, we are Catholic, and it is Catholic Central, but I know a plethora of people that are Muslim and etc. So how do you not deal with them in the classroom, but they have different viewpoints and they bring it up, and I think it's great for discussion. And the main thing that I love about your class, obviously there's a curriculum and everything, but it is mainly discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what you do with how you discuss and you get everybody interactive, I think that's the best trait about you as a teacher, is how you can get everybody in the room.
Well, thank you, Matthew.
Of course.
I appreciate that. That's what happened. And then I get stressed out about how I didn't get things done.
Yeah.
It's a win-lose situation. Your question about other faiths, yes. I appreciate and definitely have a lot of respect for those of other faiths. I can't imagine being in a classroom where a majority of people are Christian and I'm not, right? That's intimidating. Yeah. Whereas I've never been to a public school, or in the sense of as a student, and I can't imagine the opposite, being the only Catholic, having certain viewpoints and then everybody else in the classroom is not. And I've talked to a lot of kids that feel that way in public schools, a lot of my cousins that went to public schools. So then I always kind of look at it in both perspectives, right? Whereas, we could talk about this value and these morals in our theology classes, and we can have this assumption that everybody agrees, right? But they don't, and even a Catholic may not. But if you're specifically asking about different faiths, one thing I've noticed is many of our students that are not Christian or Catholic enter the school with tons of respect for the school and tons of respect for the Catholic Church. I think I've had more issues with Catholic students with disrespecting the faith than non-Catholic students disrespecting the faith. I also do think, and I believe, excuse me, that there's an understanding, right? You walk into a Catholic school with the name Catholic in it, Catholic Central, and you kind of have to have that understanding. Okay, I'm not Catholic, I'm going into a Catholic school, so I have to, with respect, I'm going to abide by what they do, right? I'm going to go to Mass, I'm going to sit, I'm going to stand, I'm going to have respect for what they do. I don't need to pray the way they pray. I don't need to do the sign of the cross, right? But I'm not going to sit there and be defiant and not stand, and I do have a lot of respect for that. I encourage a lot of people in class to give their viewpoints. And I have talked to a lot of students that were non-Catholic, and they say, I understand the Catholic faith a lot more now because of, what they learn in class. And what I tell them is good, now when you're in college and somebody says something about the faith that is completely inaccurate, you, even as a Muslim, even as a Hindu, can still defend the church. Yeah. Just as we should defend you guys, in your faith, if somebody is saying something incorrect, right, or inaccurate. I just tend to see a lot of misunderstanding and misconceptions of the Catholic faith. There's a lot of there's a lot of that going on.
I know one of the classes is ecumenism, and I had Mr. George for that, and he did a fabulous job explaining and diving deep into different religions. And that really, puts it into perspective, because there's so many different ideas out in the world, and, some people think they're right, some people think you're right, but the whole point is to just discuss and then grow as individuals. Right?
Exactly, and we are coexisting, and we're going to continue to coexist, right? And I think that's so important to understand, to have respect. But I think what's important too in today's world, I think we have a misunderstanding of if I disagree with you, then I disrespect you, which is not true, right? And I should disagree with you, Angelo, if I don't agree with you, right? But I could still have respect for your faith. I could still sit with a Muslim, and I have many times actually, young students and adults, and be I disagree with you, but I have a lot of respect for your beliefs and your morals and your what you're trying to do right now in your life, right? And what you're following in the sense of you have respect and loyalty to your faith, and I respect that. But I can disagree, right? I can disagree with what you believe in, and have a different perspective of faith. And so we can live together, in the world together, and still not agree with each other in a civil way.
For sure.
Right?
For sure. So for prayer, I just want to talk about prayer a little bit.
Sure.
So I know there's different type of prayers. There's the prayers you say, the Our Father, Hail Mary, the Rosary, all that. And then there's also personal prayer, right?
Yep.
Myself, I really don't like going about just saying the Hail Mary 10 times and keep saying it. I feel that's repetitive. So I prefer to do more personal prayers and conversations with God. What are your thoughts on personal prayer versus just structural and formal prayer?
Yeah, I usually call them formal, informal prayers, or spontaneous prayers, conversing with God, and then structured prayers. I think there should be a balance. Because I do think as humans we need structure, and it kind of brings us back to the center. But I also 100% we need that informal prayer, talking to God, having a conversation, meditating, and bringing God into our days. It's funny, I have a very low attention span, right? And so maybe you guys don't see it as much, or maybe you do, I don't know. But whereas praying the rosary for me is very difficult, but I do it still. I do it because it challenges me. Yeah. But I also need my YouTube video or my Spotify audio, and I'll have my rosary in my hand, and I need somebody to pray with me, right? Because otherwise it's super repetitive, and it's just where am I at? What am I thinking about? I'm not intentionally, focused. But I still do it because I recognize there's power in that, and I recognize it's still important. But then I also have my prayer of throughout my day, right? Of asking God to be part of my life. You guys have no idea how many times I'm asking God for patience, internally. Jesus, please help me have Matthew Wittbrodt in my room. But no, there are so many, and then there's times where very seriously that I'm Lord, please help me to respond. How do I respond to this situation? How do I respond to this issue? How do I respond to this conversation? Right. Where maybe I feel I don't know how to answer this kid's question. Right? And then I'm super intimidated, right? And that happens.
Does that happen all the time? Oh. Or not all the time, but does that happen?
Intimidated, not all the time. Does it happen a lot where I don't know how to respond? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say I'd balance it out. I don't know everything, and sometimes there's something I know it's way back here, and I'm man, I gotta dig that out of my head. How do I respond to that? I have to remember, right, a certain fact or statistic. I don't. you know, if I'm teaching church history, believe me, history is all in the forefront of my mind. And then moral theology is like in the back of my mind. And then I'm teaching moral theology, and then someone will ask me a history question. I'm like, I got to go back into my mind, right? Because I'm human. I don't remember everything all in one sitting. But I will always, you know, I would tell students, I'll get back to you. And if I remember, I'll try to keep a note of it and get back to them. But in general, like you're saying prayer, I definitely think a balance is good. I think we need mass. I think we need a structure, right? I think it really helps us to center ourselves. I have had countless students that have told me, like, even if the mass is boring, it still helps them in their prayer lives, and it helps them to bring themselves back to the church, to their faith, right? Because I could sit here and I could say, okay, I'm not going to do all these formal things. Jesus is just my own personal spirituality, okay? Fair. He's my own personal spirituality too, right? But who is holding you accountable? Right? And okay, we can have, my friends are holding me accountable. Okay, great. Your friends are. We just talked about that. What else is holding you accountable, right? Well, I pray. Really? How often? How often do you pray? Well, I talk to God all day long. Really? How much do you talk? What's your prayer life look like? Then you start asking people questions, and it's like super minimal. Like people are like, well, Jesus is my personal Lord and Savior, and He is, I have my own prayer life. Really? Then what does it look like? And guess what? People are embarrassed because it's minimal. Why is it minimal? Because who is keeping you afloat, right? How are you keeping yourself in this like world where you have this foundation? I'm going to keep going back to the two foundations. You have this foundation of rock. No, not a coincidence that, Jesus called Peter the rock, where we keep going back to the church, and it brings me back in my week, right? Whereas we kind of just mentioned a couple people earlier, Matthew and I, and like how like there's a recognizing of faith in the Mass, where I recognize that I receive the Eucharist, I listen to the gospel, the readings, the homily, and I leave, and I'm like, wow, I'm like filled again, right? Even if I'm falling asleep, even if I think about my day, listen, we all do that. I do that, right? Like, we all do that. Like, but I know that I am filled when I leave. Like, I'm filled with the grace, I'm filled with God, and I leave, and now I can take the week on.
Right.
Right?
That's why Sunday's the first day of the week.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You take the week on.
So I've been consistently talking about foundations.
Yeah.
So what would be, let's say, 3 good steps to get a better foundation for your faith life and prayer life?
Okay, so let's assume, because I don't want to use this as a step,
Yes.
let's assume that these people are open, right? Because you have to have that openness. No one's going to force it, and no one will force it. So you have the openness. Okay, so then 3 steps. 1, you have to have a prayer life, a routine. Even if you fall off, getting back. Why do you think Lent works for people, right? Having a habitual routine. It's gonna create good habits. But then a lot of us sometimes we look at habits. If we look at, sorry, I'm trying to get my words together here. Sometimes we look at good habits as a negative thing, where it's like, oh well, I view Mass as a habit. My prayer is habitual. Okay, well that's good. You created a good habit, but now enhance that habit.
You have to find meaning.
Find meaning in the habit and then change it a little bit, but keep the habit going, right? Creating good habits. Everyone's been talking lately about the book Atomic Habits because it's phenomenal. How do you think we go about our days, right? Like, we create good habits. You wake up in the morning, you make your bed, you brush your teeth. These are good habits. If I say, wow, it's so habitual that I brush my teeth every day, and I've stopped doing it because it's so habitual. No. There's a reason you do it, right? It's so habitual because you need it, and it has purpose. So 3 steps. 1, start a prayer life. I like to tell people that I have kids that come to me all the time asking these questions because I think people think no one does, and people do. I have 17-year-old little boys, right? Young kids that the world thinks that nobody loves Jesus anymore at your age as boys, which is completely a lie, right? I have had countless students over the years come up to me and be like, Ms. Bahoura, how do I start a prayer life? And I get so happy when I get that question because you can't do it yourself, right? And you need somebody to guide you. I need people to guide me. So I have things. I have resources. I have books. I have prayer cards. I have rosaries. I have, we have websites. We have so many things. But then the kid has to create a routine, right? And that's all on the kid, right? I can ask, I can follow up, but it has to create a routine. I always recommend finding a friend, like I said earlier too. If you go to Mass by yourself, it's always good to have a friend with you. Obviously, it's good if someone is that consistent by themselves, but it's always good to kind of keep up with each other. So prayer life is so important. Then the sacraments. If we're talking a Catholic student, the sacraments are so important. I recommend confession once a month because you need it. I need it. I need Jesus. I recognize my faults. If I want to grow in my character and develop in my life and be the best version of myself, and I need the grace that I receive from the sacrament, then I need to go to confession once a month, right? Then what's going to happen if I don't go? Then it kind of pushes in the back of my mind that all of a sudden it's 6 months later I haven't gone to confession. Then I don't remember what I did 3 months ago, right? Prayer life, then the sacraments. And really the third thing is just like continuing that desire. Because then if you have your prayer life set and then you have the sacrament set, then everything else will fall into place.
Right.
Right? Then it's like sharing. I would say that sharing aspect. Like now share Jesus a little bit. Talk to people about Jesus. Bring up Jesus in your life. Like someone's venting to you about an issue, bring up God, right? Like send them a Bible verse. Send them a TikTok that has to do with God, right? With Jesus, with scripture. Like there's so many things out there.
Sorry. What are your thoughts on those like TikToks where like they say if you scroll
like the video, like the skit?
And it's like scroll if you scroll you don't love Jesus.
Then everyone has those guilty conscience.
Yeah.
I'm like I scroll so fast, you guys have no idea, because I'm not gonna let them make me feel guilty about like my faith. Like I know Jesus, and I know Jesus is not judging me, right? He's not judging me for scrolling past.
Yeah.
I think I get the tactic, right? The advertisement tactic. I get it,
I
but
think that's like a sin, because you're using I don't know, because they have good messages sometimes.
But you're trying to reel people in. Like I don't like when people put you in a corner.
Right.
I think that's putting someone in a corner. Mm-hmm. Like if you scroll, like back in my day, it was always like a lot of the memes and posts. It wasn't videos yet.
Right.
And it was a lot of it was like, if you don't share amen if you love Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's like, so if I don't share that, does that mean I don't love Jesus? Like I don't, so I don't like that. It's kind of putting someone in a corner.
Yeah.
And then it makes people feel guilty. Like, so do I not love Jesus then because I didn't share that? Like, so then you're questioning yourself. I don't really like it. Yeah, you're questioning yourself with that. So I very, very confidently, because I know my faith, I keep scrolling. So.
Do you have you heard of George Janko?
Yes.
What do you think about him? I mean I've been watching his podcast lately, and he's been kind of inspiring to me because the way that he just summarizes Bible verses and explains it to his viewers is really beautiful. So
I think, obviously, as a Catholic individual, as well as a Catholic theologian, not a theologian, theology teacher, I was going to say theology teacher, I'm very skeptical on Christian influencers and TikToks and Instagrams and all that. And I see it all. I know you mentioned it in your... I was going to talk to you about that, actually.
Oh, you did?
You mentioned it in your statement of belief essay recently.
Oh, I did?
You did. And I came across his name, actually, a couple weeks ago. My sister brought him up to me. With respect to all Christian denominations, I obviously am Catholic, and
Isn't he a Syrian, right?
He's a Syrian, he's not Catholic.
What's the difference between a Syrian and Chaldean?
Okay, we're not going to get into that right now. That's a controversial topic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. We can talk about that later, Angelo. But I will say this. I did not know he was, I didn't know what he was, Catholic or Protestant. And one of my sisters was asking me about him, and I was like, oh, I'm curious. Like, I'm curious to see, like, what is he? Because I did notice some good videos and messages that he had. I noticed one of his videos was against purgatory. So like right away I was like, oh, he's not Catholic. Again, respect to him, respect to his message. Then I get very skeptical, because if somebody wants to live a Catholic life, Catholic faith life, and their morals and values and beliefs, and if their foundation is not strong, those influencers can really be like, whoa, he makes a good point. Oh, he's saying all these things. And then, but in reality, he's missing a lot of the Catholic faith's viewpoint and misconstruing the viewpoint of the Catholic Church, which the reason my sister was asking me is because she has a friend that was watching them, and we're Catholic, and if I share something with somebody who's Catholic, I'm going to give them very Catholic things. And so if somebody doesn't have a solid foundation in the Catholic faith, those things can easily take them away from the Catholic Church. I'm a little skeptical on him.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's good that he gives out great messages with Scripture and, his viewpoints on that, or his obviously his faith life and things like that. I don't know enough about him to really form a full opinion. I just know that he's not Catholic, and so therefore I'm a little skeptical on his teachings, like his viewpoints and his teachings. But not against his Scripture, obviously, not against the good messages that he has in his videos.
Yeah. So the last thing I just wanted to share.
Sure.
You know about The Chosen, right?
Yes.
And it's crazy because I think it's a great show because it doesn't show, I know like Jesus' stories are supposed to be, like just like the Bible, but it shows a different perspective. It shows how the disciples were all brothers. Like there was like a crew of guys that were just hanging out. Jesus was there as well. It's a really great show, and it kind of reminds me of CC because we're a bunch of brothers as well, and we're all trying to be disciples of God, right?
Yeah.
So, have you watched all of it?
Not all of it.
Not all of it?
Not all of it. I just recently watched the ones that came out in theaters.
Oh, you did?
The season 4, first, second, and third episodes. And I always think about that, actually. So it's funny because as much as I've taught about the apostles and disciples of Christ, and we look into Scripture, and even as a teacher, even as somebody who's been in the faith for a very long time, I forget how human they were, right? And so the show really, I agree with you, it really brings out like a beautiful perspective of like, they were just regular guys. They were jealous, they were envious, they had their sins, they had their faults, and then Jesus was still like, yep, Peter, you're the keys to the kingdom, right? Yep, so-and-so, you're going to be doing this. And, and then it's all these positions for people and these like great, like he had high standards for them, knowing that they were just sinners. One thing I noticed in the most recent episodes, and I won't spoil it, is that one thing I will say, I don't think it's spoiling it, but in this one of the episodes, Peter gets the keys, right? It's the scripture passage of Jesus making him Pope, right? So he's telling Peter, you have the keys, you get the keys. I'm going to name you Peter now. You're no longer Simon, you're Peter. You have the keys to the kingdom. I love the way they portrayed everybody's reaction. So some guys went home and was like, Mom, can you believe it? Jesus gave Peter the position. Like Jesus gave, and they were jealous. And I was just sitting there like, whoa, this is such an interesting perspective. Like that the disciples and the apostles they legit were probably so jealous of Peter because why? Because we know the faults of our friends, right? Why does he get that? Like I know what he does on the weekend. I know what he says to his girl. I know how many things he does that people are like, whatever, this and that. I know how many sins he has, but Jesus is putting him on a pedestal. So one of the scenes is like the mom is telling one of the disciples, like a mom is saying, that should have been you, like her son. Like, well, you need to go tell Jesus. He needs to give you a position. So I was just like, wow, this is hilarious. 100% it was like that, right? There's no way they were all like, wow, Peter, that's such a great choice, right? Like, Jesus, you made a great choice. They were just humans. So I really find that to be, I agree with the connection, right? But I think that gives perspective of, as much as the apostles and disciples were human, like we have to remember we are too, right? And as you guys are brothers, and we're all trying to, like, everyone tries to, like, I would say in a good sense, lift each other up, but also in a bad sense, we tear each other down way too much in the world, right? And it's like, well, you're doing this on Saturday night, but like, how dare you go to Mass on Sunday? Really? Because that's probably the best place that guy or girl on Saturday night should be on Sunday morning, right? Why are we tearing people down for trying to become better? And how do we know what they're... And it's like, well, they're not becoming better. Well, how do you know that? How do you know they're not trying? So I think that was my perspective of that brotherhood and that fraternity, which I really didn't have a lot. I love the show, and I want to watch all of them. I just haven't had a chance. That's my summer Netflix watch, right? So. Well,
with that being said,
sure.
This episode has been a pleasure. Thank you for being.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Matthew, for having me.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Right. That's it.